Wednesday night. Good evening, everyone. Everyone has come on. I've been sitting here for the last few minutes just watching all the comments roll. I don't think I would be missed. I could just stay off to the side and you guys could carry on conversations. It's really interesting. Man, it's so cool today. Wasn't it great? Just it was just one of those great days to relax out in the sun and oh, sorry, that wasn't today, was it? No, it was not like that. Um, it's bad when you open up the back door and it feels like uh, someone's breath coming in on you. That's what I thought it was like today, anyway. Well, it's good to be with you tonight. Hopefully, it's cooling down where you are, a bit more relaxed, a bit more able to bear up under it. Just remember, it's going to be the middle of winter soon. We're going to have those nice Queensland days where it's crisp and you need a wind cheater on to make it through. And we'll be wishing it was warm just like this when that happens. But we're never really satisfied except in those times when the seasons change over, I don't think. But no, it's all good. We had good rain here, and it sounds like other people had rain as well along the way. That's always a good thing in moderation. Now, tonight we're looking in the book of Ruth in case you stumbled onto the stream there and you had a look at the title. And I tried to make it an exciting title, A Bitter Homecoming, because I think that's exactly what it is. We've just completed our study, not a long study, but a brief study in trials, troubles, temptations, and we've found ways and means there to overcome and to continue on. And we found great help and hope, of course, from the Spirit of God who leads us into all truth, from the Bible, which instructs us and teaches us how we ought to live and walk. And we know that there are troubles and trials in this life. We're not going to skate through without being put to the test. And that's because many things are common to all men, saved and lost alike. And life is difficult. Life is hard. It has a lot of troubles and pitfalls. And of course, that's just the nature of living with sin and in a sinful body and in a sinful world. And tonight, we're going to look at someone who endured those troubles. And have you ever heard someone say to you, maybe someone mentioned this to you when you were young and, you had your first, I guess, your first bad turn of events and you were down and discouraged and maybe a little bit depressed even. And someone, maybe it was your mom or your dad or, an aunt or an uncle or a grandma or grandpa said to you, "White, don't you worry. Someone has it worse than you do. You don't have it the worst. There's someone else out there and they're doing it just as tough and tougher than you are. You're not alone." It didn't feel very comforting, did it? For some reason, I was never comforted by that. I could never get comforted by the fact that, well, there are other people suffering the same way, or someone else is suffering worse than I am. And I know that was true. Absolutely, I know it was true. But it didn't give me a lot of comfort. And maybe it did for you, maybe it didn't. Who knows? But I'll tell you, it made things. It made you realize, at least, that we were not alone in this life, not meant to be alone, and that bad things happen to all men. They happen to all people. Ruth found this out the hard way. We're going to read the book of Ruth here, chapter 1, and we're going to read it in segments. I've divided this into 3 segments. Verses 1 through 5 talking about the bitter stroke of fate that fell across Ruth's life. Secondly, verses 6 through 18, the sorrowful return. And then finally, we're going to look at verses 19 through 22, when all seems lost. And I'm hoping that this will build upon what we have studied and looked at in the Word of God. And as we go through, maybe we'll keep bringing those things through as well in the lesson, so that you can see where this falls in the great story of time. So let's begin in Ruth chapter 1, in verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephratites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took to them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelled there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them. And the woman was left with her 2 sons, was bereft, I should say, was left of her 2 sons and husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard that the country of Moab, how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Now, first of all, the story itself. So Naomi was a woman who was born in what is Israel. They were Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and so you know the area in which they lived. But in the time that they lived, in that specific period of time in which Elimelech and Naomi were married and they had the 2 sons, in that span of time, famine fell on the land of Israel. Now, we probably can't imagine famine in the sense of famine in these days. These were people who lived season to season and lived, more or less harvest to harvest. But when the harvests fail and when food becomes scarcer and scarcer, there comes a famine. And there's a point in the famine, I guess, when you have to make a decision. Do we stay? Are we going to be able to survive, or do we leave? And Elimelech decided that he would go into the land of Moab, because they'd heard that there was opportunity there. Maybe there were jobs, things that he could do so that they could eat and live and continue on. It would be easier than where they were. So they pulled up stakes and they went on their way. A lot of people would say, all of this time that we lived in this country, I don't know how old these people were when they left, Elimelech and Naomi and their kids. We're not given that information. But, they would have lived in Israel when there wasn't a famine. But just in this specific span of time, there was a famine. People become really enraged when things happen in their time frame, right? So you look at the generation before you who may have lived in a time where the economy was prospering, there were jobs aplenty, they were able to perhaps work their entire life and save for a home and raise a family without very little difficulty or apparent difficulty. But when those things touch you, it makes a great difference. I'll tell you what, we're living in times that are almost unprecedented right now, where, people who want to work can't work, and people who are working are being turfed out of their roles because they're not willing to submit to certain so-called requirements. It's easy to say, why now? And to cry out against God. Why have you brought this onto us now? Why did it have to be now? And to be honest, if you didn't think along those lines, or if those things didn't come to your mind, I doubt that you would be human. Very few people have the flexibility to just go along and say, well, this is different. I don't know many people like that. Uh, People are affected. They're touched by the surroundings. We all want to provide. We all want to be able to take part. We all want to play our part. But sometimes it's not the way. I'll give you an example in the current situation. As you know, I've been given a I'll call it a loose time frame in which uh, my current job will be terminated, and it's carrying on a little bit longer than they expected. But that the termination date, that's what they call it, has been laid out. That this is the day they're going to be terminated. You know what my first thoughts were? My first thoughts were, well, it doesn't matter to me. I have to stick with my principles and my thoughts on things. But I also said, I'm so close to retirement. Isn't it funny? That's what people think about. Just so close. Why couldn't it have been, 5, 6 years down the road? Why did it have to happen now? Well, I should remind myself that people have it worse than I do. Some people have a lot longer uh, working life, let's put it that way, than I do. Of course, no one can say exactly how long they have, can we? Our time on earth here is measured out by the Lord, and when the time comes, He will call us home. But you know what I mean? The standard working life is just sort of that way. It says that this came to pass. All of this came to pass in the days of the judges, and I want to start right here. So this is that period of time. If you want to look at it, look to the book of Judges, which recounts the acts and the acting up of the nation of Israel. As Israel would turn from God, they would break God's law and would turn away from Him, and then they would be oppressed by someone round about them, and then they would turn back to God, and God would raise up a judge. And so this period is from the period of Joshua, who overlived Moses. Remember, it was when Moses died, Joshua fell into that role. At the death of Joshua, we then come into the book of Judges, and it tells us about those judges, the first of whom was Othniel. And there were a number of judges, some you would know, like Gideon. Perhaps you know of Jephthah, or maybe you know of Samson. These were all judges, men that God raised up in a particular time to free the nation of Israel from the bondage. And they were only raised up when the people cried out to God and said, we have sinned. We have gone against your word, and because of that, we are under the thumb and under great pressure from our enemies. And God would always take care for the nation of Israel. He would always relieve them from their sufferings. Reminds me of a human being and of our life with God. We're so frail spiritually that we walk with Him for a time, and then we walk away from Him for a time. The heart of man is deceitful above all things. So, in this period of time, that's when these events took place. So, you could understand why there might be a famine in the time of Judges. The people were half of the time, or perhaps even more than half of the time, in rebellion against God. So, when you're in rebellion against God and against His word, they had turned against His word. So, two key things: they turned against God and they turned against His word. And because of that, God sent a judgment upon them from the nations round about them. So I'm not surprised that there was famine. But, what about Naomi and Elimelech? To them, they were worshipers of God. And so away they go. They strike out. And you want to know the bitter stroke of fate. How many people have died in the world? Well, virtually everyone, right? So death is common to men. That's one of the things that's common. They say two things are certain: death and taxes. Taxes for sure. I don't think I've ever gone a day without paying that. Make sure they extract that. Death, it is more than likely coming. Of course, we could be changed. We might be the lucky one, changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. The dead in Christ rise first, and we which are alive and remain are caught up together with them in the clouds, changed, just changed in a moment from a physical, blood flowing body to a spiritual, glorified body in a moment. So we could potentially escape it, but it's likely, isn't it? Death is likely. It's common to man. And so death came upon the family, first with Elimelech. Imagine the blow. The main wage earner dies. And this is in a time period where you're in a foreign country, right? And you don't have family there. It's only you. You're relying on one another. She has children. The children eventually marry, and they take wives of the children of Moab. And the time comes when the sons die without children. So now Naomi is bereft of her husband and of her two sons. And her two daughters-in-law are with her in this great time of bereavement. Now, those are difficult circumstances. Put yourself in Naomi's shoes. She must still look after herself. And she has also Orpah and Ruth to look after as well, or at least, in her care. So it was a very, very tough time. And we see then that the time came when Naomi decided, look, there's been a break in the famine. We've heard that there's a break in the famine in Israel. I'm going back to my homeland. I've been made bereft of my husband and of my sons. And now I'll go back to my homeland, to the land that God has provided to his people. And so it says in verse 6, and then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab how that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Wherefore she went forth out of that place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voice and wept. And they said unto her, Surely we will return with thee unto thy people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, Go your way, for I am too old to have an husband. And if I should say, I have hope, if I should have an husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would you tarry for them till they were grown? Would you stay for them from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieveth me much that for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. And they lifted up their voice and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave unto her. And she said, Behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and to her gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after thee. For whither thou goest, I will go, and where thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and thy God my God. Where thou diest, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if but death part thee and me. And when she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left off speaking unto her. So this is a sorrowful return, isn't it? Have you ever gone back to any sort of return? Maybe it's a homecoming, or maybe it's a reunion, like a class reunion. And everyone imagines in their mind that they've gone away and they're going to be successful, and then they're going to come back, and then they're going to have something to show for their life. In the end of your life, people expect and want to have something to show for their life on earth. And imagine Naomi. She mentions it here. She says in verse 13, It grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord is gone out against me. He's gone out against me. I'm bereft of my husband, and you're bereft of your husbands, my sons. And I'm sorry for you that the Lord has dealt thus with me, because it put them in a very difficult position. See, they were in dire straits. Naomi had determined to go back to her home, to go back and to make do as best she could. And she gave ample opportunity for these two daughters of Moab to return to their mothers and to their gods, to the gods that they worshipped, which were not the gods of Israel, the God of Israel. And of course, Orpah did go, and she was sorrowful about that, but she did go back. But Ruth clave unto her, the Bible said. And what Ruth said to Naomi was Ruth wiping her hands, virtually wiping her hands of the past and looking forward. Imagine saying, after Ruth had just said, it grieveth me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me, that Ruth would say that your God will be my God. Imagine it. That, to me, that's great faith. And see, as far as Naomi was concerned, this was a sorrowful return. Oh my goodness. I would imagine the trip from Moab to her home in Bethlehem, Judah, would have been the most sorrowful. Can you imagine it? Walking back, knowing that we've gone out full and we're returning empty. We have nothing in our hands. We have just enough to survive along the way. That's tough. That's doing it tough. What do we do when trouble strikes? Do we blame God? Do we say, God, why now? Why did this have to happen now? If it had just waited 5 years, or if it had happened 5 years earlier, it wouldn't be so troublesome, so hard as it is right now. or when trouble strikes, we think that we are destined and touched to live this wonderful life where nothing ever happens, where, if you were a stock market, you would only be going up. People make money on the stock market going up and down. They bank on that. And life goes up and down. There are great climbs and there are great drops, and they're all a part of life. God knows all things. He knows the beginning from the end. So he knows the circumstances I'm in. He knows mine. He knows your circumstances too. And he knew Naomi's circumstance. How could Naomi see anything good coming out of this? All she was going to do was go home, go back to her place, and I'm sure await death. She was not looking for a husband. She was too old, she said. She's just going back to live like a poor widow would in Israel, gleaning and taking what she could until finally death would come. How could she know what lay ahead? But why don't we ever think that we don't know? We always focus on the very bad things that are happening. No one could doubt that this was bad, right? Who would say, oh, you shouldn't think that's bad. You shouldn't cry a tear. You've lost your husband, your two sons. One of your daughters-in-law has returned, and now you're coming home empty-handed. You should be thankful. You should be thankful to God because he preserved your life. We always think about the current situation. We never think about what will be or what can be. And you remember what we talked about? One of the great ways to overcome this sense of struggle and trial when we're under great pressure is to stop and think of the end, not of where we are right now. Look beyond where you are. That's hope, looking beyond what you know. All of the circumstances around you, I'm not doubting this, they may all be negative. But beyond those circumstances are hope. So why don't we stop? I wonder if Naomi on her way back said, oh Lord, I went out full, I'm coming back empty. What do you have in store for me? What awaits me? What trials, what blessings await me? I don't think there was any way that she could know. But there was certainly bitterness because, and we'll close with this, Ruth 19, chapter 1, 19 through 22. This was her return. So they too went up, and they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass when they were come to Bethlehem that all the city was moved about them. And they said, is this Naomi? Been a long time. Where is Abimelech? Where is the two sons? And who is this woman with her? Is that Naomi? No doubt the world and troubles and trials had changed her. She looked different. And she said unto them, call me not Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty hath dealt very bitterly with me. That is, the circumstances that fell out to me have been very bitter. I went out full, and the Lord hath brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, saying, the Lord hath testified, seeing the Lord hath testified against me, the Almighty hath afflicted me. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law with her, which returned out of the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem in the beginning of the barley harvest. Yeah, at least there was going to be food. There was going to be something to eat. And that's where our story ends for tonight. But it's not the end of the story. Those of you who know the story of Ruth and of Naomi know that there is much beyond this, and that there is a great blessing in the end. I think of Job, who lost everything: houses, family, livestock, riches, all were taken from him. And remember him in sackcloth and ashes, rueing the day that he was born. There's no way Job could have known the end of all things. No way that Job could know how the book ends. So how does the book end for you? How does it end? Well, right now, for some, it's very bitter. Right now, there's a lot of trouble and strife and an unclear future. But that's not the end. How does the book end? Well, I have seen the future. I have seen the end of all things. Only because the Lord's revealed it in his word. I'm not really some kind of visionary. I just read the book. You read the book and you'll know the future too. How about this? You, in the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, glorying, rejoicing, tears wiped away, living an eternal day of joy. That's the end of the story. How does it end? It ends with the wiping away of all tears. It ends with a new heaven and a new earth, wherein only dwelleth righteousness. And you and all of the others who have trusted and believed in the Messiah, the Lord Jesus Christ. That's the end of our story. This isn't the end. We're somewhere in the middle. It's always bad to guess the outcome from a bad event, even in a movie. Bad things happen and you think, oh, this is a terrible movie. But even in movies, they change it, they alter it, and it ends sometimes shockingly. You have no idea. God has our lives lined out. Yes, there will be trouble. There will be struggle. Our faith will be put to the test. Remember Abraham and Isaac? Our faith will be put to the test. But in the end, we win. In the end, we end up in the presence of Jesus Christ. Take heart, brethren. Take heart in all trouble, not because of the trouble, but in spite of it. Look beyond it. Look to the end and rejoice. And God will say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. You're not looking at today. You're not looking at the events, but you're looking at the Savior. You're looking at eternity. May God bless us, take care of us, and look after us, and we know he will. And may he bring us together on Sunday morning. We'll be meeting in the hall again this Sunday. So we look forward to you being with us there. Remember to come in the side entrance. It's gate 9 by the side of the hall there. And we'll get together and fellowship and enjoy one another's presence. We're still having Sunday night and Wednesday night services online. And I tried to find a way to set up my phone so that I can video the messages. And unfortunately, you go to JB Hi-Fi, they have this problem called supply chain issues. Apparently, all the truckers are doing something else. So the supply chain isn't filled. So they were out of those. Hopefully, I'm going to find one. And once we do that, then after the service, we'll come back and upload it. And those of you who can't come to services because of living away or whatever, you'll still be able to follow us and follow along with the messages and the sermons. And of course, we're still going to be here Sunday night and Wednesday night. We look forward to seeing you then. And we really do appreciate all of you coming together here tonight. And hope you've enjoyed one another's fellowship, even if it was by texting. You've got brethren that are thinking about you and praying for you. And may God bless you all and keep you safe. And we'll see you again on Sunday morning. God bless you.